Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Bruni, and joining me once again is Shay Dixon for this Monday Mailbag Podcast. Shay, how are you doing today?
I'm hanging in. Watched a lot of football this weekend. Good to watch NFL football where you have no real stock in anything
Yeah.
as a Saints fan. But got to watch all the LSU players ball out. Joey B and Jamar are moving on. Knocked out and Lael Collins is on the team, so knocked out a Buffalo Bills team that's got Reed Ferguson and Tre'Davious White, and now they move forward to face the Chiefs and
Yep.
Clyde's been out for a while, so obviously not sure if he's playing, but a nice rematch from a year ago to go to the Super Bowl. Exciting to
Yeah.
watch. Joe Burrow is that dude right now, man.
Dude,
Did you,
yeah,
did you
they
hear
play great
how?
players.
Did you watch the game?
Yeah, I watched most of it.
Did you hear how Tony Romo talks about Joe Burrow?
I want someone to talk about me the way Tony Romo talks about Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I mean it's not even like, oh, this guy's special. Oh, he's up there with, like, Tony believes he's like, oh, this guy is the best quarterback in the league. He's like, he's just so different than everybody
I
else.
love it. I love it. I think Damone Clark recovered a fumble in the Cowboys game. So I want to give him a shout out as well. That was cool to see because obviously he's been coming back. A lot of people I feel like within the Cowboys organization expect him to be good. So that's comforting moving forward. But yeah, mailbag pod today. Before we get into the mailbag, Shay, you wrote a story this morning on LSU's NFL Draft early departure. So players who were not out of eligibility that decided to go to the draft. You will have a story up on the players that exhausted their eligibility in the coming days. What were your takeaways? Where do you want to start when we talk about the players entering the draft from LSU?
Look, here's the big thing. We talk about Joe Burrow, number one pick. Jamar Chase, obviously a high first rounder as well, top 10 pick. They're not going to have that this year. The run on that is over. The big debate here is 8 early departures, meaning, as you said, guys who have still had eligibility remaining but decided to go pro. And I'll run you just down the positions here, and we can kind of talk about it before we get into the mailbag. The only offensive lineman in the group is Anthony Bradford. Started a ton of games at right guard. The only wide receivers are Kayshon Boutte and Dre Jenkins. The only defensive linemen, or two of them, an edge rusher and a tackle, would be Jaquelin Roy and B.J. Ojulari. The lone linebacker, Mike Jones Jr., and then you get a couple DBs, Mekhi Garner and Jay Ward. So all very familiar names for LSU fans. These guys, a couple transfers in there, but that started, a number of other guys who started multiple years. I mentioned maybe not, they're not going to have any top 10 picks. Here's the debate. Will LSU have any first rounders this year? And it is a tough call because mock drafts are what they are. They are people putting out often very similar lists and just reordering it
Yep.
of what the kind of top prospects are, who they are, what teams need different things. And by the time, Matty B, that you throw a few quarterbacks in there and some offensive linemen and some edge rushers, and you get through the bulk of what people take early, there's just a handful of receivers in this crop, a few probably, that are going to go above Kayshon. You wonder now, is Kayshon going to go in the middle to late first round, or is he one of the first guys off the board in the second round? T. Higgins was one of the first guys off the board in the second round. So no shame in that. You can obviously go in and immediately start in the NFL. But a lot of people, at least a year ago prior to his injury, remember Kayshon's sophomore season, after he'd blown up as a freshman, he was leading the country in touchdowns. He was leading the country in receiving yards. And boom, he gets hurt 6 game in, didn't play again. And it felt like he wasn't the same after that. Just didn't have the same production, didn't seem to have that same burst. Those questions will all get answered at the combine and the NFL draft. Kind of look ahead towards pro day, combine, what his medicals look like, how he runs, how he tests. All those things will be big. It'll be really interesting to see. And then the other guy is B.J. Ojulari, and I think it's safe to say he might be a little bit behind Boutte on some boards, but he's also popping up maybe late first round, maybe early second round. An uber productive player, really solid player, I should say. as an edge rusher. His brother Aziz went early second round. I think he was a number 50 overall pick, so middle second round. A couple years back, he ends up breaking the Lions. I think it was their rookie sack record, might even be their team sack record right away. So NFL scouts know about his little brother. They know BJ is a big time player coming out of LSU. Those are the two guys. I don't know if you have a gut feel. For me, I'm just not able to tell you anything about Kayshawn until he gets to the combine. And then it starts to come out of what does his medicals look like? Is he completely healthy? How does he run? With BJ, I feel like I know the answers. It's just going to depend on he's going to interview great. I'm sure he's going to test well because he tested incredibly well out of high school. It's just a matter of, hey, who's ready to make a move on an edge rusher in the late first round or early second? Am I off base here? Is that what you see? Is there a chance LSU has a first round pick in your mind?
It's gonna be really, really close. I think you see defensive end and receivers as two of the premier positions in the NFL in every NFL draft. I think if you look back on it, I remember I looked at this at some point, but receivers are basically around 6 or like 5 to 7 in the first round taken. And obviously, I think you have like a top 4 or 5 in this draft as far as receivers go when you have Quentin Johnson, Jalen Hyatt, Jordan Addison, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Those are like your 4, and then after that, you're kind of shuffling. Like, how do teams view Kayshawn compared to Josh Downs or Nathaniel Dell from Houston? Like those type of players, I think that's what it's going to come down to. Like you said, is the testing of Kayshawn and how he looks, because coming off of that injury, while I think he got back to close to 100%, I had questions. I think everybody had questions about his, explosiveness, just how comfortable he was on the field. And I think it's kind of like a Derek Stingley situation, whereas he can be that player, but it's getting past the mental hurdle. It's getting back to where he was physically moving forward. And I think that was like the tape this year for Kayshawn wasn't great. So, now that he is going into the draft and there are a bunch of players that did put up really, really good tape, like the 5 players I mentioned, and I know Josh Downs was in and out at times with North Carolina hurt, and then Jackson Smith and Jigba was hurt a lot for Ohio State as well, but still, Kayshawn played to his credit. Like, he didn't sit out, he didn't opt out, but what did he do on the field? And it wasn't great. So I don't know. I don't think Kayshawn goes first. BJ, maybe I could definitely see a team reaching on him. If anything, I think I could see a team reaching on him before Kayshawn. I don't know
agree
if
with
that's
it.
fair or not.
It'll be interesting to see, and we'll learn a lot more about this. Look, the NFL draft deadline was a week ago, so we're kind of recapping that, giving you the 8 guys who decided to leave early. We'll touch later, like Matty B said. I have an article coming on the guys whose eligibility was up. Ali Gay, Micah Baskerville, guys like that. I'm curious though what happens, because I feel very confident between Kayshon Boutte and Ojulari, there will be the first 2 players to get picked, unless something goes south there. Then I just don't know what to say, because you've got a group of Jay Ward, Mekhi Garner, Jaquelin Roy on the D line. And even if you want to toss Joray Jenkins in there, who's kind of being put around as a 3rd, 4th rounder, of how the order goes then. And Matty B, I thought about this before the pod. I was going over some notes. I can almost make a case that any of them will be the next guy up. But for some reason, I just keep thinking Jaquelin Roy is a guy that's going to end up improving his stock enough to be that next guy up. And agree, disagree.
Yeah. The thing about Jaquelin Roy is last year, I'll never forget, after last year's draft, I did a story and I put it out, and I had just, basic projections of like, hey, Kayshon Boutte, first round guy, BJ Ojulari, first round guy. Like, I just went through those type of players from last year, projecting forward to the 2023 draft. And I had Jaquelin Roy in round 3 through 5. I think it was something like that. And, everybody came out the woodwork and said, hey, there's no way he goes that late. There's no way he's round 3, 4. And then all the mock drafts came out, the way too early mock drafts all
Those
came
are
out. And
terrible.
they were like, Jaquelin Roy, late first, guy, like first round guy, this and that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see it. And I think Jaquelin Roy was really good for LSU this year. I'm definitely not taking anything away from him. I think he put out some solid tape, but he wasn't as dynamic as he was 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago, I should say. Like he didn't pop out the way he did 2 seasons ago in a lot of ways. He had flashes for sure, but I just don't think overall from a consistency standpoint he was at that level, and so he did drop a bit. I think defensive tackle. I looked it up historically, like defensive tackles going in the first round, like over the past, I think it was like 8 years or something like that. There's not many. Like you just true defensive tackles, like nose tackles. Like Jalen Carter will be drafted, obviously super high, but like after that, you're gonna go with a couple more in the first round, and then second round it's kind of bare. And so really, defensive tackle is a position where it's like either they're all in on you or they think they can take you at a later spot. And that's why I think it's an interesting position for Jaquelin Roy here, because I think he's really, really good and really talented. But yeah, maybe he does fall into the third round.
I will say this: Jaquelin Roy was in the top 10. Micah Wingo, the other defensive lineman for him, was number 1 on this list, but in the top 10 for most snaps played this season for a defensive lineman. So he's going to have a lot of film out there just from this season. I mean, you could dig through obviously hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of snaps that he made this season. I also think when Mason Smith got injured, he had to play. There was no more moving Jaquelin around. He had to be that D tackle, even nose tackle at like look at times. And perhaps that's kind of affecting maybe what he would have done if he could have been on the edge or, been playing Micah Wingo's position. We'll see. We'll see. I'm really intrigued though by Garner and Jay Ward. I love Jay Ward. And I think that the NFL folks, a guy like Jalen Mills reminds me of Jay Ward so much. And I can't remember. Let's see when Jalen Mills got drafted. It may well have been late. He was a 7th round pick. Okay. Yeah. So a guy like him is still starting in the NFL. He's been with the Eagles. He's been with the Patriots and has been a very important piece to the puzzle because he can play corner. He can play nickel. He plays safety. And that's what Jay Ward does. So I feel like Jay Ward obviously will hear his name called long before the 7th round. I'm just curious how much teams kind of really grow to like him after seeing really what all he did from the 2019 national championship season to now. And the same with Micah Garner, who, I mean, he came in as a transfer. He was a JUCO kid. Then he went to UL. Then he transferred to LSU, gets a year in the SEC and was by far their best corner. I mean, it was clear. And he was consistent. He's physical. He can be a boundary guy for you. And if he goes up to the combine and runs well and tests well and all of that, he could start to sneak up boards. There's just always so many corners out there. So it just depends on who you fall in love with. And then the other 2 guys, Mike Jones Jr. and Anthony Bradford, we'll see. They're not really popping up on many mocks. Mike Jones had eligibility left and didn't even do a formal announcement, just kind of said after the bowl game that, hey, look, I've been at Clemson for a while. I've been at LSU for a while. I'm ready to at least go try my hand at the NFL. And then Anthony Bradford, who is a big offensive lineman, but he played right guard very well for him and played right tackle at times. Does a team go after him in the middle to the late rounds? I would say yes. But I think that you've always got the case where some of these guys could have improved their stock by coming back. But there's always situations where you wonder, would their playing time have remained the same or was this the time to go? So those are the 8 guys, not your top heavy list. This ain't the 2019 roster where you're going to have 4 or 5 guys up there at the same time in the first round, but still be a solid draft for them. And we'll see ultimately what the number ends at. I don't think they're going to hit double digits, but it could be close.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. That'll be an interesting situation here. I'm just looking at the exhausted eligibility lists moving forward. It's like Tremont Shorts, Ali Gay, Micah Baskerville, Jarek Bernard Converse, Colby Richardson, Joe Fuchsia, and Todd Harris. Like off the top of my head, I don't know how many of those get drafted.
Joe Fuchsia probably.
Sure. I couldn't
Baskerville.
tell you honestly. Sure.
Bernard Converse, Ali Gay.
You think all 4 of those get drafted?
I do. I think all 4 of those get drafted.
Okay. We'll see. I wouldn't be mad at it at all. All right. Anything else? We want to move to the mailbag.
Yeah, let's get mailbag rocking.
Okay. All right.
I've got it open, so we can kind of just jump right in.
Yep. Go ahead.
First one. This one comes from our man Hester79. Your opinion, our opinions. Weakest spot on the roster right now. The roster's been overturned. They've got 77 of 85 scholarship players available. Mind you, this is 41 returning players, 25 high school signees, 11 portal additions. And if we're looking at the weakest spot on the roster, what would the answer be? It's obviously going to have to change from what it was during the season because they really helped themselves out. The answer for me would have been corner, for instance. Well, now you've taken 4 transfers at corner. You've brought in a number of signees. You got a couple guys going back. So I feel a little bit better. I'm going to say the weakest room for me is safety. And I don't mean that as a slight to the guys who are coming back. Greg Brooks, Sage, Major Burns, Langlois been hurt. But that's all they have, especially if Jordan Allen's a nickel. And even in that scenario, look, Sage Ryan's played nickel. Greg Brooks has played nickel. If I'm talking purely who's going to be back there as your 2 safeties, I would hope it'd be Greg Brooks and Major Burns. It might be Sage Ryan. But if your only other option after that is Langlois and he's been injured and you took nobody from the portal that, is coming in as a safety, and you signed a couple high school safeties, Kylan Jackson, Ryan Yates, Doherty. You don't necessarily want to lean on any of those guys in year one. I feel like safety right now, if something happens to Major Burns or Greg Brooks, like I don't even know what they would do.
Yeah, that's the question, especially since we're like we think Sage probably would be a nickel, or it would probably be better at nickel, but he'd probably have to bounce back to safety. Maybe a guy like Jordan Allen. I mean, yeah, that would be a really tough situation. So I think that's a good pick. After safety, I'm looking at if we remove Harold Perkins from inside linebacker, I think they could still add players at inside linebacker, but if it's just Penn and Spates, and then after that it's like the Weeks brothers and Brathwaite, I think that's still a position of need for me in the transfer portal as far as depth goes. We kind of talked about this on the last podcast, on the portal podcast, but I think that could be something where they look to add another piece. And then I'll keep I said this last year. I think I said this consistently last year. It's like the running back position is going to have to prove it to me that they are able to be consistently dynamic, because last year I just thought they were one of the bottom tier running back groups in the SEC. And so we'll see. I think Josh Williams was really, really good for them last year. I think John Emery had flashes, obviously. After that, you had Kane, whatever he gave you, you took, and then Goodwin was hurt. So you add 2 freshmen to that, but you return everybody else. I'm always of the belief that I need to see it to believe it from everybody that hasn't done it yet. And I know Josh Williams was good, but I just think you look around the SEC and there are some elite running backs, and LSU still does not have that.
Well, here's the good news. At this moment, everybody's coming back, including John Emery, who passed up a chance at the NFL draft. So if you can get all those guys healthy, at least you've got lots of options. I will note, though, we both chose a defensive group, and the defense already has more players than the offense, 39 to 34 on scholarship. They also took 11 transfers. 10 of them were on defense, and we're still naming defensive positions that they could use more transfer portal help at. So offense seems to be a lot more stable than defense at the moment, just in terms of turnover.
Definitely. All right.
Let's see. Tiger Ranch said, do we do any meet and greets? So we're going to start doing that. Billy, myself, Matthew will get together in the football off season, and start to talk about some meet and greets, maybe around baseball with, baseball weekends. We can get some folks in town and all meet up and go hang out and talk ball. And we've got Hunt Palmer, who's the best in the business, writing Monday stories for us on baseball. You can catch him every day on the radio, obviously on ESPN 104.5 here in Baton Rouge. But he'll be doing a lot with us as well. So we're excited about that. Number 1 baseball team, number 1 recruiting class, nothing not to love there. But moving on, Towson Tiger, what changes do you think we will see on offense for the 2023 season? I think it's something we've talked about a good bit. My feeling is we're inching closer and closer to Mike Denbrock and Brian Kelly's hope of being a heavy 12 personnel, operating more out of 12 personnel, basically being what Georgia was, where you've got really talented tight ends, you've got an offensive line that can move people, you get a running game going, and then boom, you can just pop plays to the receivers. Georgia was doing it with Ladd McConkey and those guys. I mean, LSU's got Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, and
Yeah.
the list goes on and on. So I think in terms of just overall, philosophical view of what changes with the offense, I think they just want to be more 12 personnel than they were this year because they didn't have, for lack of a better word, they didn't have the personnel to do that this year.
Yeah, I think that's the point that we've hit on that before, and I think that's true. I definitely think that they're going to look for that moving forward to integrate more tight ends, involve more tight ends into what they want to do. That's why they took 3 in this class. We'll see if they get one out of the portal or not. I think overall, like philosophically, I think they want to be a run first program, run first team, even with the receivers they have. Like you said, kind of run to set up the pass in theory. Jayden Daniels obviously is the quarterback that can do that. Now, the question is, he ran the ball to set up the pass, but he didn't run the ball to set up the big play pass game. You know what I mean? So that's where we're going to have to see him continue to develop moving forward because they have, like you said, they have the receivers to be explosive. And so you can't just be a run the ball and check down type team next year.
There's another question I think people are asking about what's going to change about the offense that we'll answer here in a second because somebody else asked it, but we're on the same page there. High Point 35 flips it to the other side. Have you been told about any concrete change in defensive scheme for 23? The best way for me to answer this is getting Mason Smith back and getting some help along the D-line. You had to replace some other guys, obviously, with Ali Gay and BJ Ojolari gone. They can be more multiple. And I think we already saw at times he was willing to take a Harold Perkins and put him on the field in different situations and find ways to be creative with getting after the quarterback or getting into the backfield. I think the biggest thing, you studied Matt House a ton when he got hired. The biggest thing is he wants to be multiple. It's almost like the 12 personnel thing with Denbrock and Kelly on offense. It's tough to be multiple if you don't have a lot of options to be multiple. Well, now they do again. They get their best defensive lineman back. Mekhi Wingo looks like one of the best defensive linemen in the SEC, if not the country. So you can move guys around. Guys like Savion Jones and Quincy Wiggins will all be a year older. You've taken some good transfers. I just feel like in the trenches, they're going to be able to do different things. And then for me, that sort of affects what you do on the back end.
Yeah, I think you worded it well. The return of Mason Smith cannot be understated, especially with how Mekhi Wingo played this past year. You're set on the inside. You have Harold Perkins, who is the Swiss Army knife that can move anywhere, can play anywhere, and can do anything you ask him to do. He will be more comfortable. Harold Perkins will be asked to, I'm sure, to rush the passer plenty, whether he plays inside linebacker, whether he plays Jack, whether he plays Sam, whatever he plays, Harold Perkins will be involved in every play. And I think that just opens the door for a lot of things. If you're a defensive coordinator, you don't have to stick to one thing. You can be, like you said, you can be multiple. You can change it up. You can blitz in different ways. I don't think overall House is going to do anything super exotic. Like he's not going to be one of the highest. LSU will not be one of the highest blitz percentage teams in the country. They have enough defensive linemen and pass rushers that they don't have to blitz, and that opens up the field for linebackers, safeties to cover more ground.
Mason Smith coming back is just such a big deal. I think it all starts with there because then you've got him and Mekhi Wingo, and you can really build everything out. Even with a guy like Harold Perkins, you've just got so many options of guys who are playing at the highest level that are among the best players in the country. And because of that, I think that lets House do a little bit more than he did in year one. And look, he still says a lot of these guys are scratching the surface of what they need to know in this defense. And an off season gives them the ability to catch a lot of guys up. High Pointed also asked, do you know what defensive position Zy Alexander played in high school baseball? Yes. So he played at Lauraville back in the day. God, they won a 2A state title when he was on that team. But he was an outfielder and the leadoff hitter, I am pretty sure, for they had another team at Lauraville that went to the state semis. And I think he led off both years and played outfield, and then was playing quarterback on the football team, wide receiver on the football team, free safety on the football team, and then went to Southeastern and played corner, and is now coming to LSU to play some corner. So,
side note, it has been asked on our board, or I guess it's been talked about on our board, but the theoretical, move of Zy Alexander to safety if they needed him, I think would be an interesting thought. Obviously he played boundary corner for Southeastern. Like, he didn't move from that really. So I don't know how comfortable of a switch it would be, but he does have the size and I think the athleticism to do it if they needed him there. So that's just an interesting thought that I had whenever looking at Zy Alexander. You do have J.K. Johnson out on the boundary, so you don't need Zy sometimes, but we'll have to see how all that plays out.
Roy Hobbs asked, and I like that too. It reminds me of Jarek Bernard Converse, what he did this year of, he came in as a corner, but when you got into a pinch, he can move back and play safety for you, and he did it very well. Really great tool for them. Jay Ward, obviously, same type of player.
Yeah.
Roy Hobbs, what type of diet is best for a head football coach? I think you'll quickly understand where he's going with this. Option A, plant-based, heavy portions of stadium grass. B, alternative diet, gumbo with no rice or just dusted crawfish. Or C, carb loading diet, where you're just eating Cheez-Its that's mixed with grass and sweat and everything else that's on the field. We've got 3 head coaches, no names next to them.
No names.
I'm going B, because if that was the recipe for B, that head coach to me looked like he would win in a cage match. I mean, he was trained to go. He was in the best shape, let's be real, of the 3. So
I'll take the Cheez-Its off the ground. Give me the carbs.
The Cheez-Its off the ground move was bold, but he did it. That's what you do when you win 10 games.
Yes,
that is what you do. In year 1, at least, you get you a Cheez-It. Cairo Tiger, I love this question because I love this comp. Does Harold Perkins have a Micah Parsons role in this defense? Should that be what his role is, where the Cowboys use him as a pass rusher and an off-ball linebacker?
I think so. I think we watched the Cowboys last night, and Parsons was moved around a lot, but he was always kind of in an attacking position. Obviously, as an edge rusher, he's fantastic, but he didn't move up, to an off-ball linebacker, but he was still over the ball in a lot of situations, can move around, can stunt in different ways, use his speed to where he can line up over the center and then stunt and blitz to a side, blitz to either side. It just makes it hard on offensive linemen to communicate that and just be on the same page about where he is at all times. And I think Harold Perkins, as we continue to move into the offseason, obviously we have not seen a spring practice yet because they haven't had them. And maybe the coaches don't even know at this point. But the more I move into the offseason, the more I just want to see Harold Perkins line up as a Micah Parsons type player. Like, I want to see him at the edge. I want to see him as an off-ball linebacker that's attacking. I just want to see him consistently in a position where it's threatening the offense and it's making the offensive line uncomfortable for the other team. So that's, as we move into the offseason a little bit more, that's where I'm at with Harold Perkins.
And there can be a role for that and a role for the jack, right? Because there's similar things of, okay, you're on the edge, you're rushing the passer, but Deshaun Womack and some of these guys actually play that jack position. We saw at the very beginning, Harold Perkins moved to the jack role, and they would just put Ojulari down and take Ali Gay out of the game. So we'll have to see, if you use multiple guys on the field at once who kind of fit that role. And I think House has probably got plenty to think about in terms of his new personnel and what all they can do this offseason. So that's a good thing. Slick Deuce Man, do you expect the offense to look the same next season, or will the coaches trust Daniels to a little more and allow for throws downfield? I'm not sure the coaches don't trust Daniels. I just don't think Daniels trusts Daniels to the point of, I don't want to turn the ball over. I don't want, I want to live for another play. I'm going to check it down, or I'm going to go with this route. And my answer to that would be yes. This kid has started 40-something games. You're to the point now where they've really honed in on things you got to do to take the next step. And number one on the list is be more aggressive. And we saw it in the Tennessee game. He admitted this is that's when they really said, you've got to let go of the football. You cannot be so conservative with it. And those next few games, including Alabama, he did that. Now, they struggled in the month of November. They had an easy blowout win in the bowl game. He was hurt a lot of November. But regardless, I think there is number one on their priority list this offseason for Joe Sloan will be getting a guy like Jayden Daniels to watch all the film and see, hey, look, this is where we need you to be attacking downfield more often.
Yeah, I mean, I think you laid it out well. I'm just from a human nature perspective, like if you're Jayden Daniels and you watch Garrett Nussmeier go out there and throw the ball and just throw it up in certain situations and it works out, I would assume, me, if it's me as a quarterback, I'm like, I can run better than Nussmeier. I think, I can be safe with the ball and I can make the easy completions. I think you just have to give Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, and guys like that a chance. Like if you're in Jayden Daniels' shoes, you have to be looking at them and be like, all right, year one, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I didn't want to lose us the game. I knew our defense was good. I knew we could run the ball at a very high level with me. But now this year, because the expectations are different, because we have a year's worth of film, there is no excuse for this thing not to be more explosive as an offense. And not for nothing, if they're not more explosive as an offense with him, he has Garrett Nussmeier right there who will step in and I don't want to say take his job, but he'll get a lot more reps in games if the offense is not moving the way it should be. You're muted, Shay.
Daniels made a huge jump from Arizona State after 3 years of starting
Yeah.
to what he did this year at LSU. Like I have full faith that he will continue to clean up his game and look even more sharp a year from now. Chrissy asked, with Auburn poaching Demario Tolan, that's one way to put it, and other schools trying to poach others, is LSU doing anything different to minimize further roster losses coming into and out of spring practices? Hate to lose another linebacker. I think what you do is you just meet with these kids as much as often. You see where they stand. I think they probably, it sounds like Tolan didn't go to the bowl game. So something was going on with Tolan away from the field that wasn't made public. And during those conversations, I'm sure that it was clear that, hey, if you're looking to get into the portal or you're looking to change things up, then now's the time. And he did it. In terms of like them trying to poach players, everyone's aware of what's happening in the portal and the new era of football. And I can guarantee you Brian Kelly, being around for 30 plus years as a head coach, understands kind of what he has to do to keep the team together, to keep guys happy. Position coaches know that. I don't think they're going to lose another linebacker, but I'm also playing the odds there. They only have 5, and
yeah, and I don't really know who else.
One of them
who
just
would
got
even
to
be.
campus. So
I don't even know who it would be from that linebacker group that would be a candidate to transfer at this point, at all. But I mean, it's not that anytime a player leaves and goes to another SEC school, it's because they were poached. I promise you, LSU is doing their fair share of poaching. Every school in the country is doing their fair share of poaching at this point, because it's just the state of college football at this point is go get the best players and go help your team win. So there you go.
with Santana asked, who do you see filling out a 2 deep on the O line? And he says, look, there's only 5 or 6 guys coming back that we've seen play. I think no matter what, your starters, or at least your starting group into the 2 deep, are Will Campbell and Emory Jones, who both started games all year. Miles Frazier started games all year. Garrett Dellinger started games all year when he was healthy. Charles Turner started games all year. I know that they've been looking at the portal and there could be competition at center, but I'm marking Charles Turner into that group. And then you look at, what's on when you move to the back end, the only guy in the 2 deep after that who's ever really played is Marlon Martinez. And he's played a good bit, and he's been a rotational guy. He's played some different positions, but to fill out an entire 2 deep right now would just be a guess, because none of these guys in the back end beyond Martinez have played. Like Kimo Makanayole and Bo Borderline are the only 2 guys coming back. They're going to go through spring ball with 8 offensive linemen. That's not many. And you're presuming all of them are healthy, which is a tall task for offensive linemen in the offseason when often they get little things cleaned up, or they take it easy and, not trying to push themselves too far. So I don't think there's an answer right now. I mean, you want Zalance Hurd to be in the 2 deep. You want DJ Chester to be in the 2 deep. So those are your obvious options. You also bring in Mabenga and Tyree Adams, but none of those guys get here until the summer. So this is more of a question, I think, for fall camp.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see if they end up adding a transfer on the offensive line or at center or anything like that over the offseason. But in theory, if you have this starting 5 and you have Marlon Martinez, DJ Chester, and Zalance Hurd as your next 3 up, I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, obviously that's in an ideal world where everybody stays healthy and everybody's on, works out and plays well and all that stuff. That's ideal, but I mean that's that's a pretty good 8, I think, to go in with.
And that's the only 8. So we'll watch for the portal and we'll see if they go after anybody else, but they need summer to get here in a hurry so that they can actually fill out a 2 deep on the offensive line. Hold that Tiger. Which freshman tight end locks up the number 2 spot behind Mason Taylor? If we're talking game 1 here, I can make the case that it might be any of the 3 high school tight ends they signed, because if Mac Markway is healthy, physically, he's your most ready blocker. And if they're running out 2 tight ends and Mason Taylor is more of a receiving guy, Markway would probably be your best blocker, but McGohan seems like a safe middle of the road bet. Like, he's had a great senior year. He's a big kid. He's going to fill out in the spring and summer. He's already here on campus with Mac Markway. So those 2 guys get a little jump on the competition. But this summer, when Kamorian Pimpton arrives, that's your goal, is for him to be your other tight end. So for me, this is a question that needs to be phrased week 1 versus a month in versus the back half of the season, because I think that answer changes as you go.
I think you bring up a good point with Pimpton. McGohan is kind of a similar type to Mason Taylor in a lot of ways, as far as a receiver goes, as far as a receiving tight end goes, that has a little bit of speed on him and can kind of do some things after the catch. Markway is obviously the best blocker of the group by a wide margin. And then Pimpton would be an interesting combination with Mason Taylor, in terms of you have Mason Taylor, who is a guy who can, sit down on the 5-yard hook and get to the sticks, all that stuff. Can also take some catches get some yards after the catch. But Pimpton could be that big play type guy. Now, how fast he can acclimate to the SEC level, how fast he can make those contested catches over SEC safeties and nickel corners, that's the question. But there's no doubt that he's very, very talented. The upside's there.
All right, I agree. I love the upside. Where are we at here on the questions? Okay, Grape Swish. As of now, most important position to attack in the portal in terms of depth. And do you think we can legitimately build a roster deep enough to be contenders in year 2? Well, they were somewhat contenders in year 1, and I actually think they'll be a little bit deeper in year 2. So I think they're already there in that regard. Most important position to attack. Well, earlier I said safety I thought was the weakest. We know linebacker is still a spot where you'd like to have someone. I'd pick one of those 2.
It has to be safety. I mean, we've hit on it. It has to be safety. And then I'd throw linebacker and probably center or something like that in that group.
I would also dangle this carrot out there of the question we just answered of, if there's a tight end that goes in that only has 1 year left that's good, I would take him, because that really helps you bridge the gap to the other 3 true freshman tight ends that you're bringing onto roster. But hey, look, Mason Taylor did his thing as a true freshman, so perhaps the same is in store for them. And Grape Swisher wants to know, who's your least favorite SEC team?
Least favorite SEC
team? Mine's going to be Missouri, because I don't think they're in the Southeast.
Missouri.
Simple as that.
That's a good point. It's not a bad point at all. It is weird geographically, and especially since they're in the SEC East, considering that they're way, not as far east as the other teams. Least favorite SEC team. Shoot, I don't know. Probably Arkansas.
Oh man, really? I didn't know people didn't like Arkansas.
Well, I don't know. Whenever I think of Arkansas, I think of North Texas beating Arkansas, and then I think of Eric Musselman, basketball coach, who I'm not super high on. I think he's a great coach, but does seem kind of crazy. And then, yeah, just their whole Woo Pig Sooie is
Okay.
at times. There you go.
Everybody
Oh,
listening.
wait. Time out. I'm sorry. Texas A&M is the
Okay,
pick.
well there you go. Everybody
I'm
listening is
so
saying
sorry.
Texas A&M.
I'm so sorry. Texas A&M is the pick. I'm from Texas. Yeah, no. Texas A&M is the pick.
Okay.
Forget
So
everything I
Arkansas
said.
fans, I'm sorry for what Matthew said. You're no
Love
longer
Arkansas. Shout out Arkansas.
You're no longer on the hate list.
No, A&M. I'm sorry. What was I thinking?
They're not even going to be able to check out at the local Walmart anymore if you keep this up. Your Tyson chicken days are over. Bourbon and Cheerios, longtime listener, first time mailbagger. So we've got our first lie of the podcast. Have you heard of any guys on the team leading unofficial workouts? So yes, SWAT teams are in order. So those guys are responsible for leading workouts, leading pretty much everything with the guys who are in their different little pods. Those guys are running back Josh Williams, quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, center Charles Turner, punter Jay Bramplett, quarterback Jayden Daniels. So you've got both your quarterbacks in there. Offensive lineman Miles Frazier, defensive lineman Micah Wingo, offensive tackle Will Campbell, DB Greg Brooks, and running back Noah Kane. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 11 SWAT team leaders. So those are the guys that Brian Kelly wants to see them lead through not just workouts, but the off season.
Yeah, sounds like a good group to me.
Bourbon Cheerios, how about that linebacker room? We've touched on it.
How about it?
How about it? It's Greg Penn, it's Harold Perkins, it's Omar Spates out of Oregon State, which was a great ad. And then it's the Weeks brothers until Christian Braithwaite arrives this summer. We've talked about it a ton. Love Whit Weeks coming in. Think he's going to be a really good player for them. So it's growing. The linebacker room's growing. Would you rather fight two wolves who recently ate or 75 hungry chickens? Matty B, you already answered this one in the thread. You said if it was one wolf, I'd go wolf, but I'm not beating two. Give me the chickens. I got to just keep moving and take them out one at a time. Do you feel like you got to fight these chickens? Well, I don't want to fight the wolves.
Yeah, well, the chickens, I don't know. I mean, chickens can get pretty big.
Yeah.
You know? I'm not a farmer. But
I would like this question more if it was just like if you ran into 75 hungry chickens or ran into two wolves that are full, that maybe I'd choose the wolves because maybe they just have no interest at that point.
Yeah, you can just run away at that point.
Or just stand still. Maybe running is the wrong thing to do. You should probably get up on your survival skills.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't know. How far can you throw a football? You answered, I haven't done that in years and I'll hurt myself. That'll be my answer. That'll be my answer.
Like the old Cam Newton commercial where the kid was like, I gotta warm up my arm.
Right. This is like when you go to a baseball game and they have the little like, for $1 you can throw it and see how fast you're throwing it, and then you're like trying to throw it as hard as possible. I pass on that. There's no I don't need any number to tell me, 50 miles an hour and then I've blown my arm out. But yeah, I don't know. I can throw it far enough.
That's funny. That is good.
I can hit Mason Taylor. I can do some check downs.
Yeah, there you go.
Me and John Emery would be,
John Emery would have 80 receptions with Shea,
dropping them into the flats. I'm a very Brock Purdy quarterback in this scenario.
Brock Purdy quarterback. Oh man,
keeping it simple.
He beat up the Cowboys last night. So
yeah, right.
Did enough.
That's it for the mailbag. Anything big that we didn't touch on that you want to touch on?
I don't think so. Got a Omar Spates transfer analysis coming later today. Obviously had a busy week with the basketball team and stuff like that. So yeah, nothing else. We'll get into a little bit. I'll dive into a little bit more baseball stuff come February. I think they have a press conference on the 27th. I'll be at for all that good stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the mailbag.
We'll have a recruiting pod this week. We'll have a transfer portal pod this week. So plenty more to come. Stick with us here on the Bengal Tiger, obviously, and we'll keep on grooving through the month of January.
Yep. Also, might have a special guest podcast this week. We'll see how we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's all we got. We hope y'all enjoyed the podcast. Leave us a like, comment, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already. If you are listening on the audio side to Spotify, Apple, anything like that, leave us a 5-star rating and review. It really helps us out. And yeah, we appreciate y'all for joining us. We'll talk to y'all later.